So for us, the webinar, what we hope to share today is really the supports that exist for caregivers, and then as well as the supports that exist to help their environment or their world, support them along their caregiving journey as well. So that's really the point of the webinar today, and we will be highlighting resources that can help achieve that. And I will be your presenter, Bonnie Tompkins. I see someone did put a note in the chat about getting slides at the end. I do believe you will get a copy of the slides and the recording as well, and we're hoping to have a little Q&A at the end. So first, I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge the territory that I'm on today, which is actually in St. Catharines. And it's the traditional unceded territory of the Mississaugas of the First Credit Nation, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee, which is known as the League of Five Nations people. And I'd also like to acknowledge the land that I was born on in New Brunswick, which is the unceded territory of the Wabanaki people. Just quickly, a little bit of housekeeping. So the Palliative Care Echo Project, which is supporting this webinar today, it's a project that's a 5-year initiative, and it's really about building capacity and creating connection so that we can provide better palliative care, supporting the caregivers, the patients, so we can better provide that service or equip people with the skills to be able to do that across Canada. And we'd also like to note and thank Health Canada for their financial contribution to the ECHO project. The other, just some of those little reminders, which I had mentioned. So please introduce yourself in the chat. I think a couple of people have. We'd love to hear where you're from in Canada, because we do know this is a national webinar. Please submit your questions at the end in the Q&A function. We will certainly try to get to as many of them as we can. Your microphone is muted. If there's an opportunity at the end, we may unmute you during the question period. You're welcome again to use that chat function to chat with other people, or if you need any support, we do have staff on here who are supporting in the background. As mentioned, the session is recorded. You will receive a copy of it in the slide deck. And then just a reminder not to disclose any personal information. And just another disclosure, there are a couple of them on here. One really about Pallium Canada in relation to our financial sponsor. So we are not for profit. We are partially funded by Health Canada. As mentioned, this program is funded by Health Canada, as well as funds that we generate internally through our Pallium pocketbook sales, our courses, and things like that. And I, Bonnie Tompkins, do not have anything to disclose. So just quickly, I'm Bonnie. I work at Pallium, have been here for over 5 years now. My role really at Pallium has been to sort of increase the capacity on the community side. And if you have no exposure to Pallium, you will learn a little bit about that in a few slides. And just want to give a shout out to that support team that I mentioned on here helping us. And that is Aaliyah and Diana. So they are here if you're having tech problems. And then specifically, we'd also like to thank Arbor Memorial Foundation, because they are sponsoring and trying to help us spread the word of the Care Connection program, which is one of the resources you guys will see today. So they have provided us with funding to really scale and spread the Care Connection program. So we would like to say thank you to them for that. Okay. Quickly, agenda. What are we going to cover today? So we're going to cover Pallium Canada's approach to supporting caregivers, some of the research that exists and sort of drives why we took the approach we did. We're going to dive into those resources that we have designed or co-designed to support our approach, which is the Atlas Care Connections program, which has the Atlas Care Map tool and Leap Cares. We're also going to talk about the Compassionate Workplace campaign and then do a little recap. So quickly, a bit about Pallium. So Pallium Canada, we are a national organization, not for profit, which we've mentioned, and we've been around since 2000. And so in the early years, our focus was increasing capacity within healthcare professionals to provide palliative care support to their patients and the families. And as that time has grown, we have expanded. And so we now do work specifically to try and increase the capacity in communities, which is a bit of what you're going to see today. But then also we're working with healthcare organizations. So really our hope is to drive system change by engaging with these key partners or settings so that palliative care approach spans, all the different settings, and the people who need that support will get it. So that's sort of what Pallium's trying to do. So a bit about our approach within the community side. So you may, if you've ever seen myself present or a few others of us, you may have seen this image before. And really what this image is asking us is, what is care made up of? And specifically, this is looking at in the last year of life. So in the last year of life, basically, the research tells us that about 20% of it is provided by a healthcare provider, and 80% of it is not provided by healthcare. Who does that? The bulk of it lands on the caregiver is really what we're pointing to. And there's even been some new research lately looking at not the last year of life and looking at just people who are supporting someone along the trajectory. Maybe they're dealing with a serious illness, for instance. And so caregivers on average provide 3 hours of care to 1 hour of care within the healthcare or social services system, right? So it's still outbalanced, basically. And so that's why, this research really drove our interest to go, okay, what can we do here? So just some caregiver statistics that you may not have seen to really drive home why it is important for us to think about that caregiving role, support it in any way we can. So 1 in 4 caregivers are providing unpaid care. It's expected 1 in 2 Canadians are going to be providing care at some point in their life. So 50% of us in Canada will be in a caregiving role. Caregiving provides currently about 2.8 million, equivalent of 2.8 million full-time care aides, like a PSW or something like that. So that's how much care Canadian caregivers are providing. In Ontario, for instance, 2/3 of caregivers have expressed recently their feeling of helplessness, being burnt out, find it difficult to continue. And, this is another one where 50% of caregivers have expressed that, yes, their physical health has been compromised, but also their mental health has been compromised. So, it is taking its toll at the end of the day. So if we look at the image again, so we think about, well, how can we support caregivers? And this is the essence of what has driven Pallium to do the work that they've done and really engage more on that community side. What can we do? And you can sort of see here in the list, friends, right? Friends can support caregivers. Workplaces can support caregivers. Some caregivers are spending 1/4 of their life in the workplace and then providing care at home. Schools, neighbors can help. That's an experience I very much witnessed. A faith community book, it goes on. Basically, the idea being anywhere a caregiver is going out and about or where they socialize and connect, if we can get those environments, settings, people comfortable in supporting them, they are going to feel more supported. That's the goal. So what's the importance of increasing caregiving connections? And so this has been some other research that's kind of been really pivotal for us, and I will say really shaped the Care Connections program, which we're going to look at after this. And the idea around social relationships and the impact on your health. So what you can see here in these first 3 is the impact of social relationships compared to stopping smoking, compared to stopping drinking alcohol, compared to diet, right? And so the idea being that if people are socially connected, it has a greater impact on their health than stopping smoking. or, maybe doing more physical activity. So what I really want you guys to take away from this is that it does play a big role in our overarching health. And so we really took that to heart, thinking, okay, if caregivers are saying they're feeling isolated, oh, wait a minute, we need to increase their connections. This is another one as well, and it goes back to that piece around sort of looking at people who are not connected. And so this research highlights over 12 years, they tracked some seniors. The seniors who did stay connected, they had a 70% improvement in their cognitive abilities versus the group that didn't, were more isolated. They had a decline in their cognitive abilities. So again, like it feeds us, right? It's a healthy, positive thing for us to stay connected, which can be hard to do when you're caregiving. So that's why we're focusing on it. Okay, so we're going to move next into those resources. I think it's sort of mentioned we have a pretty packed slide deck today. So I'm going to move along pretty quickly to make sure we have time. And so I just want to highlight, while yes, these resources we're going to look at are sort of more on that community side, Pallium has a lot of other resources that we're doing within the healthcare side. So our healthcare courses are encouraging, young physicians, nurses, pharmacists, paramedics, to think and engage with those caregivers. And same thing with our ECHO programming. We have webinars. Some of our ECHO partners are hosting caregiving events. So, we really take caregiving seriously here and are on a bit of a mission to sort of drive that change where they feel more supported. Okay, let's get started. So looking at the Care Connections program first, which has a suite of resources within it. So really, what's the purpose of the Care Connection program? And it's really about, one, supporting caregivers, and then empowering anyone in Canada to support those caregivers. So basically to support the caregivers around them, right? And so what we really want to do here is drive that social connection or strengthen it, and hopefully increase their support network. So what's included in the program? It's a suite of free resources, which you'll get a chance to see in the next few minutes, that are going to either engage caregivers specifically or are going to empower people around the caregivers to get involved and to provide support. So that's really what it's about. Who's the target audience for the Care Connections program? It's really anybody. I'd be hard pressed to find someone that I didn't think should be engaging here. So primary certainly is the caregivers, the friends, the neighbors, the family, the healthcare professionals. But then secondary, it could be a library, it could be a community center, it can be an employer, it can be any organizations who are maybe supporting seniors or supporting specific diseases, because they're going to be caregivers there, right? So really anybody can engage in this content and sort of start to, I'm going to keep saying it, drive that change that creates a more supportive environment for caregivers. So what are the resources within the Care Connections program? I mentioned there are a couple. So the biggest one is the Atlas Care Map, and we will take a look at it in a minute, but there are a few tools here. So the first one is a free toolkit focused solely on building the care map, because ideally we would build a caregiver's care map, maybe every 4 or 6 months, because, certainly their journey keeps evolving, right? So we need to revisit that map. The other one is an Atlas Care Map Community Workshop Toolkit. Long title, but the basics of it is it's a toolkit that you can download for free. It's got everything you need in there to run a workshop on how to build a care map in your community. It's got the slide deck, it's got notes, it's got posters, it's got everything you need. Just download and use. Social connections in palliative care, because we believe healthcare professionals are a part of this change that we're trying to drive. This is a free module for them to learn about the Atlas Care Map, build their own Atlas Care Map, and look at how they can use it in their own practice. And then the last piece is the LEAP Carers program. So we're going to dive into the Atlas Care Map and the Carers program next. Okay, the Atlas Care Map. Again, it's one of the biggest tools in this program. It really sort of is the underpinning piece. So what is a care map? The care map is a visual diagram that highlights the connections and the care that's being provided. So what is the caregiver provided? Are there anybody externally who's maybe helping that caregiver? So creating that visual on a piece of paper, ideally, that the caregiver can keep on them, right? Whether it's in their purse or it's on their cell phone, and they can share it with people. And what's the purpose of it? Research has shown it increases the caregiver's understanding of their network, because sometimes we get so, we're just so our heads down and we're just doing what we need to do that we kind of forget what's happening around us. And just sort of taking stock of that can actually be a positive thing. And by doing that, then they can share, right? So they can, here's my experience, here's what it's like, here's who's helping me, I need more help, right? Here are some gaps. So that's what it's going to allow them to do. Share it with their physician, share it with families, share it with friends, and then revisit it as their caregiving experience evolves. So how to use the Atlas Care Map. Once you build your map, what we would love you to do, and in the activity you'll see, is then we would love you to create a little wish list here. So just if you're creating it on paper, which is the best practice, what we'd like you to do is wish list and write down what would I like to do. I'd like to go to yoga. So I need someone to sit so I can go to yoga. I'd like to have tea with my girlfriends. Whatever it is, write it down so that when you're sharing that map with whoever, they may be able to sit and go, you know what, I can sit with Joe on Friday night so you can go to yoga. Like, just put me down. I'll do that, right? So what it does is it takes that barrier down to offer and accept help because it's there on paper. And it helps when you're meeting with your healthcare professional. So that's sort of the next evolution after you draw your map. And we just want to share. So this is an example of how Pallium sometimes scales and spreads really great content. So this map was actually built by Atlas of Care out of the US. And it was built on tons of research and piloting that happened in California. And so it has such great, it's such a great best practice that we approach them, and we're scaling and spreading it in Canada. So we've adapted it for the Canadian context. And so some of the things you can see here that participants said by participating in that pilot was that, just how powerful it was to see their caregiving experience visually, and that it inspired them to help others create their maps. And that's really what we want to see happen here in Canada. And we've created the tools to help do that. Okay, quickly on next to Leap Cares. So what is Leap Cares? So Leap Cares is a free online caregiving course, and it's really meant for caregivers, but anybody can take it. If you're best friends with someone who's on a caregiving journey, you want to understand better what she's going through or want to try and help her, take the course. It's free, right? And the course is what we call self-learning. So the idea being that you can come back to it whenever you've got a minute, right? Because life is hectic and crazy. So you may be only able to give 5 or 10 minutes, every couple of days to the course. So come back to it when you have time, it will be there. Move around, the first module you may not need right away. Maybe you need the next module or something like that. So you can move around in the course. So it's about getting the content that you need at the time. And then the last piece sort of that we wanted to highlight is, again, it's another opportunity where Pallium is scaling and spreading, a really great example of a resource. So this actual program was built by Champlain Hospice Palliative Care program. And so we basically were able to make some adjustments and take it digitally so more people can have access to it. So it's another scale and spread opportunity. There is a certificate available if that's something that you might need. Currently, it is only available in English at this time. And so I just wanted to sort of talk quickly about what is the content that you're going to experience when taking the course. So the goal of the course is really to provide caregivers with the information and resources needed to help them provide care to whoever it is that they're providing care to, right? So it's going to cover things like how to navigate the healthcare system, how to have conversations about goals of care, how to manage medication, but then also how to turn someone in bed, how to bathe someone. So there's those practical skills as well. that's there. And then also hitting on self-care, right? Because that really is often on the back burner. So how can you engage with the Care Connection program? And so we've done quite a few sessions, and this is something that comes up again and again is how can I engage with it? So we just wanted to throw some of the ideas out from what we've seen. So if you're a caregiver, certainly you can take the Leap Carers course, 100%. We'd encourage you to get started on that. We would love to see you draw your care map. Maybe it's, you know, if you're sort of like, I think this is going to be too overwhelming, invite a friend over, grab that free toolkit, draw it together, and then share it, share it, share it, share it. Make sure everybody understands what your care journey looks like, where you might need extra help, because that's where that support is going to come. And then please spread the word about the Care Connection program so more people can learn and use it. How to engage with the program if you're not someone who's a caregiver. Maybe you want to support, right? So certainly draw your own care map, download that toolkit, do it for yourself, right? Or maybe, you know, see if there's a workshop in your area, or we might be hosting some online workshops. Help caregivers draw their map. Like, I can't stress that enough, because it is just so helpful for them, because sometimes, you know, we're tired, stressed out, exhausted. And so just having someone read what I have to do and just tell me what I need to do can be a bit easier. Host one of those community workshops. Could you imagine if we started to teach all kinds of people how to draw these Atlas care maps, right? I see great examples of like students working with seniors on technology. What if we could teach high school students about care maps, and they could, you know, go to community centers and help draw care maps? What a great idea. Take that Leap Carers course again, so that caregiver, so you have a better understanding what's a caregiver might be going through, or the knowledge that they need, and then just spread the word about the campaign. And then the last piece about healthcare professionals. So how can they engage in this? I would encourage you to take that module, understand what is the Atlas Care Map, how it's a benefit, understand how it's going to impact your patients, and then to understand what you can do to support your patients who are using a care map. So you can help them draw their care map. You can revisit that care map, adjust that care map, look at the supports that they've listed on their wish list, and try and help them find ways to get that support needed. Host a workshop, right? Like maybe you host one. If you're a family health team, maybe you host one. So you can help there as well. And then just encouraging your caregiving patients to take the Leap Carers course. How to access it? It's free on Pallium's website. So you can simply go to pallium.ca under Compassionate Communities, and you will see the Care Connection program. This is exactly what it's going to look like here. You can see I took a snapshot for you, and it's there. It's all available for free for you guys to access. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last piece. I know a few people are putting questions in, so we will absolutely try to get to those questions at the end for you. So the next section I wanted to look at is workplace culture, right? It is very important. We spend, you know, a quarter of our adult life in the workplace. So workplaces really have a role here as well to help support caregivers when they're on that journey, because there are a lot of employees who are also caregiving. So let's have a dive into the research behind that, why we need to do this. So what's the impact? So currently in Canada, there's over 8 million caregivers, and roughly about 6.1 million are also balancing work, right? And then we look at 1 in 4 are also sandwich caregivers. So that means they're caregiving maybe to a parent, working, and they're raising children as well, right? So wow, stress level through the roof. The other piece is of those 50% who are what we call working caregivers, they are between the ages of 45 and 65. And that's sort of their peak earning years. And we'll sort of dive into that on the other side of the slide and why that's important to think about. So what's the impact on a working caregiver? So 19% of working caregivers have expressed their physical and mental health have suffered. So, it's a challenge to balance work and caregiving. And so let's look at lost wages, right? Where's that coming from? So 15% have reduced their work hours because they just couldn't do it. 10% have taken leave of absence. Another 10% have turned down job opportunities, which ultimately impact their financial future, right? 6% have quit their jobs and focused on that caregiving piece. And 4 in 10 miss days of work on average, right? And in Ontario, for instance, a third of working caregivers, are worried that they're going to lose their job, right? So that's a real fear that they're feeling. So the impact on them is high, stress level wise, so physically, emotionally, but also financially in that future when they are looking to retire, right? And I didn't even get into the fact that they're contributing money to help provide care as well. So what's the impact for the company? So let's, we do have to talk about this. There is a bit of a business case here for employers to understand. And that really is that it impacts the employees and the employers. It improves morale within the workplace. If a workplace is actively supporting working caregivers, and increases that retention. Maybe they don't quit, but they have to reduce their hours, or they get workload modification. Reduces absenteeisms, and then improves workplace productivity as well. I recently read a Harvard Business Review article that explored the skills that a working caregiver brings to the workplace, because they're so used to juggling so much, having to make decisions that are complicated in a short turnaround, maybe like in a healthcare appointment. It really has broadened their skill set to sort of think on their feet very quickly, which workplaces are starting to see is very beneficial to them, right? That all of a sudden the caregiver skill set is, it really helps with productivity. So, instead of thinking, oh, hiring someone who's just coming off of a working caregiver's leave, oh, I'm not sure about that. In fact, actually, it can be very beneficial. So how can employers support working caregivers is often what we hear. Many of us in Canada are having this conversation. So how can they get involved and help out? And here's some clear examples based on some research that came out recently. So one, offer workload modification. Sit down, have that conversation, look at what the flexibilities are that can exist there. Provide coaching on how to support. So what it may mean is the leadership team or the managers or even colleagues get a little bit of coaching on how to support a working caregiver. Like anything, we're nervous about saying or doing the wrong thing. So what we want to get rid of is that, oh, I just won't engage mentality, but rather I'll engage and I'll support. Review and adjust, your practices and policies that you have within the workplace to make sure that they really are supportive for working caregivers. And there's a variety of certainly policies and practices there that you can think about. Ensure employee workloads are balanced. So what we sort of mean here is that if someone, say, is reducing their workload and therefore that workload gets spread out across the team, try and make sure it's balanced. We don't want anybody to feel like they're all of a sudden taking all this workload on and resenting, right? So really have an open conversation and try and make sure that it's balanced as best you can. Share information about appropriate resources. I know certainly when Pallium was building the resource you're going to hear about, that was the number one thing we heard in our focus groups. People didn't know and their workplaces didn't tell them. So we've really got to talk about this. And promote that culture, a culture that is supportive and open, where someone who is a caregiver isn't going to stay silent. They're going to be able to talk to their manager or talk to their colleague and hopefully not have to leave the workplace because they stayed silent. And then the last piece is really about the goal of having a culture that's empathetic and supportive for that employee, so that, they feel like they are valued and they belong. Ensure, so how to foster that culture in the workplace. So how do we go about doing that is ensuring everybody in the workplace. So this is like internal work that is done. I know there's a lot of, EAP programs and things like that, which are really great, where employees can reach out to different services for extra help. But this is about internal. This is the conversations that happen internally. So increase the awareness and understanding of what it's like to be a working caregiver. What's their experience like? What are their fears? What are their concerns, right? So people can be a bit more empathetic towards them. Increase the awareness of those resources. And as I just sort of hinted on, certainly there's external resources that are available, but also what's internally as well. You often have some great stuff going on internally. Empower employees to take action. That's the number one. So again, we don't want a situation where people are too scared to even say hello, right? It's awkward, it's unpleasant. Employees will take extra time away from work just to avoid that, right? Or they specifically won't acknowledge they're a working caregiver to avoid that. And that may require increasing, equipping them with some skills to have those conversations or to engage. And then empower employees to engage in challenging conversations. That's a big one at Pallium in general. We have this conversation on the healthcare side, those sort of difficult conversations. They really are the underpinning there, right? And that's because when we can have conversations that, yes, may be tough and challenging, often the outcome is better. Everybody's left better supported. So the outcome of all this work will be that you create a culture that is more compassionate for that working caregiver. So what is a compassionate culture? You might be going, how are we defining a compassionate culture? So Harvard Business Review, again, just released really great research. And they say a compassionate culture is two things. One, where employees show empathy for an employee who's struggling. So say that working caregiver. And they take action to support them, even if it's, let's go sit and have coffee. Like maybe that's the action they take. But those two pieces together increase the compassion that struggling employee feels, so that working caregiver. And the feeling of being supported and that people hear them and listen, it's going to improve their quality of life. It's going to improve their mental health. And hopefully they're going to be able to stay at work and not have to make tough decisions. Okay, so let's dive into the Compassionate Workplace Campaign, which is another resource that Pallium has and is designed to support caregivers. So what is the Compassionate Workplace Campaign? In a nutshell, the goal is to increase that compassionate work environment for those who are caregiving and or dealing with grief, because we know often those go hand in hand. So that's really what it's about, and make sure that they receive the support that they need. So how does the campaign try and achieve those goals, or how will it achieve those goals? So it does it by building awareness of what it's like to be in these experiences. So again, trying to help share what are the fears, what are the concerns that exist, which in turn also builds empathy. You are able to understand a little more about what that person is going through. Decrease the stigma by having these conversations, by talking about it. It decreases the stigma in the workplace. It's much harder to say, oh, this isn't in our workplace, when people are talking about, oh yeah, I'm a working caregiver, or I was last year, I'm not anymore, right? So we got to have those conversations. Raise awareness about resources and supports. So that's internally and externally. People don't know, right? So that's still a key piece that needs to happen. And then promote and enable those supportive conversations by engaging in those difficult conversations. That is a big piece. Ultimately, empowering people to create that more compassionate culture. So we'll take a little dive into what's in the campaign, but I won't get into it in too much detail. Again, I really want to make sure we have time for questions. But basically, the campaign has roughly around 30 digital resources. So it's fully digitized, French and English, and they fall into 3 buckets. So there's communication materials that are designed to facilitate communication, whether it's manager to employee, colleague to employee, senior leadership to the workplace, whatever. There are pieces in here to help in all different areas. In here as well are stories, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a minute. We have a few activities that are going to help decrease that stigma, help, have a conversation. Does this exist in our workplace? Is there anybody who's caregiving in our workplace, right? Or has been a caregiver? And then there's tons and tons of tools in here. There's tools to support managers with workload modification questions, help them have those meetings. There's tools in here around sharing resources, tools in here to start conversations, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a manager. So there's a lot of stuff in here to support all the different roles that are within the workplace. There's also a workshop. So Pallium will facilitate a workshop in the workplace for two reasons. One is we know that certainly HR departments are feeling very stretched thin. And so this is an opportunity where we can help out. The other piece being sometimes there's still some hesitation about engaging in this content, sort of like when workplaces were initially engaging in mental health content. It's new, I'm a little nervous, so we're here to help with that. And so I just wanted to show you what, sort of a workshop looks like. So here's an example of a activity. We have an online quiz that increases the awareness of the impact in workplaces around, caregiving, grieving, cancer, all those things, right? So it's often we've heard it's been a real eye opener. And then during the workshop, we have case studies that we work through, and these are out of our stories. We have 10 stories in the campaign that highlight different experiences. Working, being a caregiver and juggling children is one example. So we work through those stories, one, to increase everybody's understanding of what these experiences are and their fears, and then how can we help, right? So we get into that as well and work through some of those tools that they could use to help an employee who might be in those situations. So really, when people come out of the workshop, they're coming out with a skill set that they are going to feel more confident to engage if a situation presents itself. So I wanted to go back to that idea of compassion, that sort of little formula we had a few minutes ago, which you can see here on the screen. So let's look at how the campaign is going to support compassion. So remembering it's empathy plus action leaves that employee feeling compassion. So first, how do we increase empathy in the workplace, right? And really that's the ability to understand and share in the feelings of another person, what they're going through. And, so the campaign has the stories. They are loved by workplaces because they really shed light and people really start to have like an emotional understanding of what someone might be going through in this situation. The activities as well. So often the activity, sometimes employees will share their own personal experience of, say, providing care to someone. So again, it starts to create that deeper connection and understanding of what it's like to be on these journeys. And then in the workshop, which I sort of alluded to, it's about increasing that awareness and understanding, that empathy for these experiences and helping to build those skills. So then the action part. So how's the campaign going to help take action to support a working caregiver? And so really that's about that taking action in any form, right? Whether it's having tea, taking on some of their workload, maybe it's making a meal that they can take home to their family, right? There's a variety of approaches for action there. So when we're using the stories, they all have discussion questions. And the stories, basically, the discussion questions look at what can I do as an individual to help someone in this situation? So let's go back to that story of a working caregiver who is supporting their partner and also dealing with raising children, right? So what could I do individually? What could we do as a team? And what can we do as a workplace to support this employee, this colleague? So working through that in the stories or in the workshop. Tons of tools. We've got conversation starter tools. We've got workload modification tools for managers to help guide them through that process. Tools, tools, tools. There are tons of them in there. And then the workshop itself, because we work through all that stuff, we've heard, you know, participants coming out of there feeling like I've got the skills to support someone who's in this situation, which is exactly what we want, for them to have the skills, feel comfortable, and take action. Here's an example of participant feedback that I thought was, you know, a great example of what we're trying to achieve with the campaign. And that is, you know, this participant said, you know, our department, we will have more empathy for our colleagues. This department actually also provides customer service. And so, as well as supporting their colleague or their customers, right? So they're going to have more empathy and compassion. And that's exactly what we want to achieve. And they, you know, we're sharing some examples of how they would change their approaches with certain colleagues or customers, because they do have customers who are on caregiving experiences. So, you know, that's what it's about. It's about that culture change internally and empowering people to understand more of what that journey is like and really what their fears may be or concerns, and then offering help. So how to engage in the campaign? You can engage in a variety of ways. Certainly as an employer, you know, we would encourage you to decide to focus on working caregivers and create that environment for them that they can self-identify and get the support that they need while they're on their journey, and have that open conversation as they progress along their journey. Managers, leaders, colleagues, employees, everybody become a champion, right? You know, talk about it to anybody in your workplace because we need those champions to start the conversations. And then just a reminder that the campaign is here to support you if you're looking to try and create that culture shift in the workplace to better support working caregivers. Where can you access it? You can certainly go onto our website. And again, you can sort of see the image of where you can learn more information, or email me. I'm happy to really share you more details about the campaign, maybe how other workplaces are using it. I will mention there is a participation fee for the campaign, so it is not a free resource. And that's because Pallium is supporting implementation. Again, because we recognize workplaces, HR departments, they are spread thin. And because we're so dedicated to this work, we are sort of taking on that planning, launching, rolling out piece for them. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. Okay, so the recap before we jump into questions, and I think we got about 15 minutes for questions, so that's good, is how are we going to create that change? So how are we going to increase the support and the engagement with caregivers, right? As they're out in their environment, whether it's with healthcare professionals, it's at work, it's their neighbors, it's the grocery store, right? How do we do that? We've got to drive that change. And there's many of us across Canada doing that. And that's what today is about. Yes, recognizing caregivers and their role, but also trying to keep driving that change forward in a variety of different ways. And so as you can sort of see here, when we go back to these images, really what we need to do is we need to fill in this side of the circle, right? That's what we need to do. And that's what Pallium is trying to do. And we're asking you to get on board and help us do that by using these resources or whatever. Just become a champion even would be great. And what we want to do is get over here where we have more workplaces who are openly supporting working caregivers. We have neighbors who are crossing the street and providing, you know, I'll mow your lawn, I'll sit so you can go to yoga, whatever it is, right? I'll pick the kids up from school. You know, so we have more people around that caregiver in their world, in their environment, who are providing support for them so that they're not feeling so overwhelmed and they're not feeling so burnt out and they're not feeling like they have to make drastic decisions like leaving work because they just can't cope any longer. We've got to change that. This is not, you know, the caregiving role is not going to decrease over the next 10, 15 years. It's maybe only going to increase. So we've got to make change here. So any questions? So I believe we have a Q&A chat. I do know some people were putting questions in the chat function. Hopefully you've been able to transfer them over. It just makes it a bit easier for myself, and we'll try and answer them. So we have Dr. Das, who's left a message in here for us. Work setting and carrying out the same. Oh, okay. So he's really just leaving a message saying, you know, sort of thank you for this work. I assume that they enjoy doing this work. So yeah, that's really great. And I'm glad you've enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much. Do we have any chats in the or any questions in the actual chat function? I don't know, Diana, Leah, I know you guys have been having a look at it. Is there any in particular? We have a few caregivers in here, I see. So thank you for joining us today. I know it can be hectic.
So earlier someone did ask, does the course involve how to advocate for the entitlements with the person that you are caring for? And I believe they were referring to elite carers there.
Yeah, so my understanding is there is a portion in there. There's a communication piece in there. So yeah, advocating for whatever their goals of care are, you know, medication management, that is a piece. So there is an advocacy piece in there for sure.
And I think a follow-up to that question was, for example, negotiating more hours of PSW support from a government program. So I think that was just, you know, talking about how to talk about the advocating for caregivers and on a bigger scale, including through a government program.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And there's some great other webinars going on in Canada today where people are focused on that policy piece, right? How to support more. And it comes in a variety of ways, whether more PSW time. You know, I know Pallium is educating as many PSWs as we can around the palliative care approach. So, I can't stress enough, there are many of us in Canada who are tackling this change in a variety of different ways. There are some people solely focused on workplaces and trying to change policies there. So absolutely, there's no one answer. And that's why I say we all have to get together and drive that change. We've created the resources for us that we think make sense, from our experience. And we really hope that you guys are going to use them.
I think this was another question that was in the chat, and then we can hop onto the Q&A. The CARP association role is to advocate for seniors to obtain whatever they have a right to. What is CARP? When are they needed?
So I've never heard the term CRP. So that's new to me. Is this like the version of AARP, I wonder? Whoever, could they unmute themselves maybe and answer that piece? Hi, Nicole.
I'm talking about CARP.
CARP, there you go, CARP. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think CARP, absolutely. I personally haven't been engaging with them, but I do know some of our compassionate community initiatives in Canada work closely with CARP. So I do believe there's been lots of presentations that have happened across Canada with local CARP organizations to have those conversations, but I can't speak to it in any detail. But I mean, if you're someone who knows you have a CARP association in your area, like reach out to them, maybe take the Care Connections program to them and see if you can host one of the workshops. That's one of the ideas. That's really why we want to equip people with tools to be able to go out and do this stuff themselves in the areas that they think make sense. So thank you, Nicole.
I think, Bonnie, we're free to kind of go to the Q&A box now. I think most of our questions are populated there. So if you want to maybe take
awesome.
them.
All right. So I see Anna Fitzpatrick has left us a message. So she mentioned, I do think what is missing is the government funding healthcare piece and palliative home care, and the training and supporting caregivers' needs to advocate for these. Absolutely. And sort of, I think I may have hit on that already. There just are a variety of us who are involved across Canada. Some are focused solely on policy changes at the government level, which increases more funding for home care, or tax credits if you maybe bring in a PSW, or you make changes to your home because you're moving your parents in. There's really just a variety of moving pieces that are happening in Canada there. It really, it's not a one answer kind of thing. And we need to keep driving that. We really do. I see, Anna, you also said the National Aging Institute is also calling for more home care and palliative care. Yeah. Financially, that is a big piece, 100%. And I know Health Canada has just launched a new palliative care campaign as well, if you haven't seen that, which may be something of interest for you. But yeah, unfortunately, that piece is sort of a bit outside our wheelhouse. Not to say that we don't do some advocating, but certainly these resources here are not going to help with that piece. Any other questions? Great. Okay, guys. Well, I really hope that you download some of these resources. Again, if you think the workplace piece is something you want to become a champion of, or maybe you are an employer who wants to look at focusing on working caregivers, then please do reach out. Like I said, we're really passionate about all this work. We really just want to equip people to be able to take action and create that sort of world where caregivers do feel more supported, can be more open about their journey and have those conversations.
We do have, Bonnie, 2 more questions actually in the Q&A.
So I do see Monica said here, sometimes caregivers share complaints about where the system policy funding supports have not worked for them. One caregiver is asking, where's the accountability and feedback survey? For the system, I assume that you mean? So if it's about the healthcare system, certainly, oh, Monica, can you unmute yourself just to clarify?
Are you able to hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, so someone that's being supported by like home care and community support, so like PSWs and nurses, this is in Ontario, and there's times where the supports that are available don't match with the need for various reasons, or sometimes it's a reliability issue, like someone books respite support weeks in advance for a special event, and then the PSW cancels 5 minutes before they're supposed to leave for this event. So things like that, where you're like, that really sucks. And then they end up feeling like they're not able to use those, available supports because they can't rely on them. And she was sort of saying like, like why isn't there like a feedback accountability survey, asking me how this is working for me? So now recognizing that caregivers don't always have time to go participate in a big research study, but it was just kind of like, other than I guess I could tell them to write to their member of parliament. But yeah, I was just thinking where else can that feedback be captured? Because it is really valuable about how people are experiencing that support that's supposed to help them.
Yeah, so my understanding, I know quite a few organizations in Canada like Bayshore or St. Elizabeth, like they are sort of managing the PSWs who are going into people's homes. So they sort of play like a connector role or a navigator role, and then they're then allocating X amount of PSWs and managing that. So I would think, I do know there is some PSW sort of hiring off of Facebook as well, or independently basically. But if you're working with a PSW that's attached to an organization, certainly I would be going to that organization, and making sure they're aware of what has happened.
Mhm.
It's just a very unfortunate situation. I will go back to again. So I was a caregiver to my partner who passed away, and my neighbors really supported me, and including his colleagues would come and sit with him because I was in school. So, I mean, I think that's why also I think there really needs to be this community piece where we get people more comfortable to offer support, so that if that person wanted to go out, they would maybe easily be able to ask a neighbor to just, can you sit while I'm out? Here's my number. If anything goes wrong, you know, here's what to do, right? So yes, that healthcare piece is there and it's not perfect. And, you know, maybe we don't have all the ways to provide when a situation isn't handled well. But I think also we really do need to focus on the community piece as well, because we may not have all the financial money to bolster the healthcare system to the capacity that is needed in the coming future, right? So we want to work on a balance, and really that's why Pallium's taken on and really trying to empower more people on the community side to get involved.
Yeah,
So
I
sorry,
think that's
probably
a great,
not the perfect answer, but
no, I think that's a great point, like to, yeah, sort of emphasize the other options that are out there in parallel with. But it's also making me think, like, you know, I wonder if and I know there's challenges with PSWs, but like if organizations were willing to do feedback surveys, you know, even if they're not able to resolve all the issues right away, at least they would make sure you know, their idea of where the issues are is the same as what people are experiencing. So
yeah.
yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see, so I see Esther, I believe, has joined into the Q&A. She mentioned that she's passionate about workplace culture. Oh, so where you work, and so she was just sort of noting that her workplace does practice, you know, supporting caregivers, which is great. Ah, perfect. And she thinks it's like the compassionate workplace campaign is worth having a look at. So thank you. I certainly I'm biased because most of these resources I've been heavily involved in. But you know, at the end of the day, it's really just about, we're just trying to help you guys who want to take action, become a champion, what have you. So we're here to help you in any way that we can. All right, I'm just going to switch to the last couple of slides. You will see my email again, guys, so you can certainly email me as well. So just a reminder, there will be a feedback survey on this webinar. So feel free to fill that in. It really helps us. The link is going to be in the chat. You will receive a copy of the recording in your email as well coming up. And, you know, just thank you for participating. We know everybody's really busy. And, you know, like I said, just figure out a way that you can get involved and try and help create that change. Maybe it's not this, but maybe this has inspired you to take on something else, maybe policy or something. So please just sort of, let's band together and try and create that change. And that's it. Thank you very much, everybody, again, for joining us on National Caregivers Day. And thank you to any caregivers who are on here with us. It really is a crucial role. It is a wonderful and a beautiful role, but sometimes can be very challenging and tiring as well. So thanks for taking the time today. And thanks to everybody for joining us. So have a great day, everybody.